Right, good afternoon. I'm Johan Coetzee, and I have a guest here today, Mr. Helmo Preus from South Africa. He's actually from all over the world. Very welcome here, Helmo.
Thank you, Johannes.
It's an honor for me to have you here. He's a renowned economist, and we're going to do a series of videos about economics within the African context, SADC context, South African context, and Namibian context, as well as global trends, economic trends, and the next superpowers. What is economics and what should it be? That's the focus of this first video that we start now. So, Mr. Helmo Preus is a very scholarly man with 5 degrees, I've heard.
That's right.
And a diploma, he told me.
And a diploma.
So he's well informed, and his interest is not just limited acting as an economist, on which he can elaborate on providing outlooks, I've heard, also for the Bank of Namibia and some American associations, as well as South Africa and other I don't know about. So he's also an author and a journalist, and he can fill the spaces that I forgot. So thank you for that checkered, I mean good now, in the checkered sense of not just a pure theoretical economist, because I think there's more than enough of them.
Yeah.
So is it possible that you just can provide us a brief indication how you get interested in economics as your passion?
Okay. So it started at University of Cape Town. I enrolled for a BSc in computer science. Computer science in those days was still very new. So I was one of the first classes. The Department of Computer Science, in fact, only started in 1971. So I was in the 3rd cohort. What I realized once I actually started with the computer science is that I would have to learn computer science every 3 years. That was the change. So I then switched to economics, where the change isn't as rapid going forward. So I then completed a BA in economics and economic history. And then when I was doing my national service, I was also busy with a BCom in business economics and accounting. And then I am numerate, so I also did a BSc in operations research and statistics, a BSc honours with Potchefstroom University. And then recently, about 10 years ago, I completed a MPhil in marketing research. So I did the market research for the launch of the VW Chico. I have done market research into granite, global granite, and I am interested in almost everything. So whether it's green hydrogen, whether it's agriculture, whether it's mining, whether it's tourism, I'm interested in all of these facets. So I'm not very focused in one particular area. I'm a macroeconomist, but I also believe that microeconomics, in terms of how firms behave, is also important. So once I'd finished my studies, I then became the chief economist at GenCorp, and I was there for 10 years. During that time, I motivated the switch from a sort of coal and gold and South African-based company to being more international, especially in terms of base metals. So I was responsible for the aluminium study that resulted in GenCorp acquiring Alusaf, which also then prompted the merger with Billiton. And then Billiton merged with BHP, which became the world's largest minerals company. And BHP is now currently bidding for Anglo American. So it is a small world in terms of the large mineral exploitation companies. Once I'd finished with my term at Genco, I then started my own economic consultancy, and I then also joined Iron Breach, where I was for 10 years, and I also did 3 years at Statistics South Africa, where I looked after the economic statistics, and we didn't have one series that had an incorrect or had to be revised very much. So that's my background.
Thank you very much. You seems like a 10-year man.
Roughly. Except forecasters now 30 years old in October.
Yeah. Would you say it's an improvement or not?
It is an improvement, and I certainly intend forecaster to have a 50th anniversary. So that's the advantage of being your own boss, as it were.
Yes, you are resourceful, and with so many qualifications and experience, applied economics, I believe, macroeconomics, also trends are also one of my interests. And it was very interesting for me also the role that you also focused on economic history.
Yes,
and I think that provides one with a large context.
Great.
And then adding with the numbers, with the statistic and the research and the marketing, to provide you really with a good balance.
Yeah, because there's patterns within economics, as in most other things in nature. So it helps in terms of pattern recognition. Is it similar, or does it rhyme with what happens previously? And that gives you, as you say, context.
Yeah. Okay. Can you briefly describe how do you see economics? What is, if you want to explain now for the layman on the street? Sometimes they regard economics as too fluffy, because they compare it sometimes even with the weather. Of course, economists seem to be so optimistic sometimes, and then they get it wrong. How would you describe economics from your perspective and experience?
From my perspective, especially with the economic history background, we start off economics as the dismal science, and that is due to Malthus saying that population growth will exceed agricultural output growth. And that sort of proposition, luckily, has not happened. Agriculture has expanded far faster than population. So we have, as a percentage amongst the world population, we are richer than we were 10 years ago, a half a century ago, a century. So it is progress. What we need to do in terms of that as economists is, in a way, to guide the narrative. We know that when you do forecasting, it's not going to be correct most of the time. But what we want to do is show what are the possibilities, and that's where economists can play a useful role. And so we know this is possible, this is pie in the sky, where can we do, what do we need to do in order to achieve certain things in terms of the money flows. So that's where the economists play a very useful role.
Would you say predictions? How do you, before that, if we can just roll back to economics as a subject. Adam Smith, the supply and demand. Since then, how did the subject actually develop? Especially with the introduction of communism and until now. And can you highlight a few trends in the development of economics over the last few hundred years?
So we start with Adam Smith, that you do things in order to benefit yourself. So the candle maker doesn't make candles to benefit himself. He does it in order to supply a need. So we are needs driven. And if you look at what Steve Jobs has done in terms of the iPhone, he's created a whole complete new ecosystem. and now more recently in terms of artificial intelligence. We know there's things that will improve. Similarly, if you look at what the generals look at and what economic planners look at, they look at logistics and how is that changing. And part of that you will also have in terms of climate change, because there's going to be lots of pressure on the ocean vessels and airborne aircraft to reduce their carbon intensity. So that's going to go coming forward.
Yeah. Okay. There was a guy named Coetzee. He was a systems thinker from Asia, somewhere in Asia, and he worked together with Professor Akhoff, Russell Akhoff in America at the MIT. And you focus specific on development, and I also focus on systems theory. And I used his methodology for most of my research, where he said that development is a systemic term, and that development inherently is sustainable. If we look at now with economic development and growth, and in that he says, economics and politics and ethics, aesthetics, knowledge, science, technology are all interlinked, different dimensions of the same thing, development. And he described, and he asked the question, what should be the purpose of economics? How would you answer such a question from your perspective?
All right. One of the places I've visited is the Institute for International Applied Systems Analysis, just outside Vienna in Austria. And that started as a collaborative East-West independent institute. And that's what I see as economics. It's universal in application, and you are working for the benefit of humankind. And the best determinant of what happens going forward is the price. If we can get the prices right, then the market will self-correct and supply and demand will balance out. So it is a systems approach, with price being the main determinant of what happens.
Yeah. Okay. He said, for example, and I can't figure out if and I don't want to put people in boxes, that economics, the purpose of economics should be to create wealth for everybody. Would you like to respond on that?
No, I think that's what it is. And Adam Smith's book is titled The Wealth of Nations. So we are looking to improve, and that wealth can be a variety of factors in terms of clean air, clean water, biodiversity. Yeah. So it's not just monetary in terms of that wealth. In that sense, is not a monetary phenomenon only.
Yeah. Okay. How would you link economics, and in terms of this question, what the role of economics should be, to the whole movement towards equality of opportunity, equality of output, equality of income, that some perceive as in itself as unattainable, because we all have different talents and productivity, and some people see opportunities, some don't. And it's actually it will create a social unjust world if all opportunities and outcome were equal, because then there's not actually a difference then with these things very similar related towards economics in a socialistic or a communist setup. How would you respond to such a statement?
Yeah, I think equality for everybody is unattainable, and it would be very boring. So if you look at one of the things that we aim for is biodiversity, and in the same way, you want to provide space for the artists, you want to provide space for the musicians. They are not all equal. And as an example, Andrea Bocelli is coming to South Africa next year. And no, the ticket prices are 5,000 rand each. So no. Whereas if I wanted to sing, I'd be lucky if I got 5 rand. So,
maybe it's just because you haven't started yet.
Yeah, no.
It's a 10,000-hour thing, you know.
Yeah. So it's the top performance needs to be remunerated accordingly, and so equality in that respect is unattainable and shouldn't be aimed at specifically.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Now, economics in itself, I mean, it is a profound subject. From my perspective, and limited experience that I know about economics, is that you cannot actually understand politics if you don't study economics as well.
Yeah. So if you go to Oxford or Cambridge, you don't study economics or politics.
Yes.
You study political economy.
Yes.
So they are merged to that. And unfortunately, in the South African context, they tend to be separate disciplines, and there is very little interchange. One of the few exceptions to that is the Institute for Race Relations, where they look at how politics impacts on economics and vice versa.
Yeah. Okay. It's very interesting that you make that comment, because I think they at some places in UK they also you study philosophy, politics, and economics.
Yeah, PPE.
Yeah. And for me that makes sense, because it's asking that should be question. I think that's very important. Except for politics, which other areas or subject areas, or when one would can't say sectors, but more subject areas, have economics the biggest influence on today?
Well, I think one of the things that an economist, especially if he's an applied economist, they should do operations research and statistics. You need those two disciplines together. So statistics to understand what's happening, what are the trends, how can you project forward? Does this fit in with a bell curve, for instance? The analysis part of that. And then operations research has a lot of fancy, everyone nowadays you would call them apps, but the applications in terms of showing where you can optimize various things, whether it's an energy performance or and that reduces the costs to the environment and promotes better efficiencies.
Yeah. Okay. Would you say, from your perspective and knowledge, expertise, which economists have the most profound influence on your if I can put it, philosophy or thinking about economics?
I would say Paul Samuelson. That was my textbook when I was at university. He's in a way, he's not Milton Friedman, sort of monetarist. He was more applied, so that's why I enjoyed his work.
Right. How would you expect the subject area of economics to be developed in the next 10, 20, 30 years?
There will be a lot more focus in terms of behavioral science, and if you look at the recent Nobel prizes for economics have been in that field. And I think going forward as well is the geopolitics of trade. We are seeing a move back into the Cold War era of trading blocks. And I think that's going to, for the next 10, 20 years, we are going to move back to that, more splitting. And unfortunately, Africa, as a way, would be caught in the middle between that.
Yeah. Would you say with BRICS and the increasing distrust in the American dollar, that there is a possibility of in the in 20 or 30 years of a multipolar world or not?
Not really. I think what may sort of supplant the US dollar at some stage in the future is something like Bitcoin, a sort of digital currency that's backed by a whole variety, a commodity basket rather than a single. No, I will support this. If you look in terms of that, if you go back to September 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, people thought that that would be the demise of the US dollar because it had been previously backed by gold. But here we are now, 50 years later, and the dollar is still the preeminent reserve currency. And that's not likely to change, certainly in the next 20 years. But Bitcoin certainly is a contender as a reserve currency going forward, because it is a limited amount that Bitcoin is producing. And I think that was part of the philosophy behind Bitcoin, that it would be a finite resource at some stage.
Do you think at the moment digital currencies, they fluctuate quite a lot?
Yeah.
Do you think there will a time arrive when it will more, I mean, like the stock exchange, it will stabilize more in future?
I expect it to stabilize more in future and will become a stable coin. But we're not at that level yet. And if you look at what happened after 1971, and it looked initially that gold would stay at $35 an ounce, and then we had the oil crisis in October 73, and gold took off, and it's been volatile ever since.
Yeah. There is a movement in America also against the Federal Reserve, questioning the existence of the Federal Reserve, because, I mean, it's as I understand it, it's not and it should not necessarily be a state central bank in that sense. I mean, it's a private bank with private shareholders. If you look at the economic history, and you can correct me, there were no major economic disasters prior to the Federal Reserve. It only happened mainly after the Federal Reserve, after the government tried to control the economy through, or when the Federal Reserve came in actually and elevated the unemployment rate. But before that, you can.
All right.
Help me out.
Have you heard the expression, I couldn't give a continental?
I couldn't
give a continental?
No.
All right. It's an American expression, and it means, I couldn't give a hoot because a continental is worth nothing. That continental refers to the bonds that were issued by the Continental Congress after 1782 to finance the war against the UK. And it was worthless, which is why I couldn't give a continental means I couldn't get anything about that. So that precedes the US Federal Reserve by almost 2 centuries. The Federal Reserve only started in 1913. We had, there had been bank collapses prior to that. We had panics in the US stock market. That's when J.P. Morgan made a lot of his money, because he bought when everybody else was selling.
Yeah.
Your famous collapses before that, not necessarily in the US, but you had the tulip boom in Holland. You had the South Sea bubble in the UK, and central banks weren't the culprits nor helping in order to avoid the panic. As we've moved to closer to now, we have much more stability in terms of having the central bank as a backstop. Which the problem with that, however, is that you then have moral hazard. So every time the US stock market goes down or the Chinese stock market goes down, the central banks, or the government, move in, and that distorts the price determinants. So people just buy because they know it'll never really go down. And that's one of the problems that they had in 2008, because everybody thought that the US housing market would never stop growing. And now we have a similar problem in terms of the China's property market.
Yeah.
So that moral hazard problem is one of the side effects of having a good central banks.
How would you? It's always easy to look after things occurred, but how would you, if you were in control of the American economy, how would, prior to the collapse in 2008, what would you have changed? Would you have, if you expected it, and what would you have done?
No, my firm is called Forecaster Ecosa. So part of what I try and do is forecast. And in February 2007, I said, the way that the US property market is heading for a disaster as much as the Titanic. So they should have acted then February, not waited another almost 18 months after that. And you can use other levers apart from just the bludgeon of interest rates. You can change the deposits required, and you make it tougher for the banks to give credit, things like that. It doesn't always need to be just raising interest rates.
Yeah. There are all the single plan in place in economic disasters. Is it over the years playing an increasing bigger role, or do we see diversification?
The central planning is more a function of government. So the problem, government, one of the functions that they're supposed to do is provide infrastructure. And the problem with the government doing that is that there's delays because of these cost overruns, etc.
Yeah.
So central planning is useful in terms of giving you a map to where do you go, like we have with the National Development Bank. So that's aspirational, but it shouldn't be predictive. So if you use those two terms, it's aspirational.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Preus. This concludes on this first very interesting, I hope, from my perspective about economics. And then the next video we will look at a different topic in terms of the largest drivers, variables influencing the economic situation in SADC and Namibia and Africa. Thank you very much.